So it's all about the ZSL work we've done on mangrove conservation and rehabilitation with reference to climate change and oops. How can I this ayaw niyang mag next. Okay. So ito yung mangroves all over the world, no? We see that in terms of mangrove species, yung maraming species yung red and ano ba ito? Maroon. So nandito si Pilipinas, no? We have the highest biodiversity.
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry,
Yes.
medyo hindi po nag-play yung inyong slides. Gusto niyo po ba na kami yung mag-share or you can send it to us or ano pong
Let's see. Ano kayang what I wonder what the problem is
you, you,
because
you can, we can try to stop sharing for now and then start again, restart the sharing.
okay, sige.
Ayan.
So
Tapos,
there, that's stop, and then where's
yes.
here is here,
Yeah,
and
and
then
then
I
choose the slide, the
screen,
presentation.
yeah, and I share it.
Ayan, let's see.
Can
Oh,
you
wow,
see?
we can see it now. Yeah.
Oh,
Let's see if we
sige.
can play
So,
it first.
okay. Oops.
Yeah, it's working. Thank you very much, ma'am.
But it's working because I'm clicking something else.
So this time you're not okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. It's working na. Okay. So,
perfect.
ito yung species ng mangroves no, in the Philippines. Mga siguro 40 to 45 depende on the source. So anyway, the three most common yung Avicennia, api-api, Bakhaw, Rhizophora, and Pagatpat sonaratia. You will see many of these through the course of my lecture. But first, let's look at places in the Philippines named after mangroves. Ang dami. Maynilad, for example, is the source of Maynila. And here we see Manila Bay and the name Manila. Wow. Which comes from this mangrove species. This is Sithifora. Masyado mahaba, pero never mind. You don't have to ano it now. After which Manila was named. But there are many other places that reflect ang dami talaga ng mangroves natin noon. So let's go to Manila Bay. This is the work of Dr. Rolion of UP Diliman 2024, where they map the extent of mangroves in Manila Bay. And they, based on a number of criteria, and they concluded pre-1890, may 74,000 hectares ang Manila Bay. Ito, no? Here. So this line is 1,500 years before the present. That's the shoreline. But if we go to here, 4,700 years before the present, Manila Bay, the mangroves extended all the way to Candaba Swamp sa Pampanga. So yung Candaba, ano yan, sea water yan, no? It was not fresh water as it is now. And if we go to the present, this is still the work of Dr. Rolion, yung 74,000 hectares ngayon, 1,000 hectares na lang. Itong mga yellow, red dots that you see sprinkled all over. This was 2015. And ang fish ponds number, 54,000 hectares. Itong mga blue, these are all fish ponds na, no? So, DNR, ERDB tried to bring back NILAD to Manila, and ito yung mga plants nila sa Baseco and also sa Intramuros. Those of you who go to Intramuros, this was 2022. And this was just, I think this year, lumaki na yung mga NILAD. So at least naman may NILAD naman ang Manila, no? After which it was named. So we come now to the goods and services of mangroves. It provides shelter, food, medicines, protection. So, ang medicines, these are traditional uses, no? But the research has shown na may molluscicide, insecticide, they kill or they stop, they prevent spermicide, that's microbes, that's fungi, cancer tumors, and so on. And that's the paper, and these are the chemicals. But I'd like to focus on recently lang, 2 years ago, we had the word quarantine, no? ECQ, MCQ, all Q, ano itong quarantine, which was first used actually by a Muslim scientist. Named with a long name, Ibn Sina, but Latinized in Europe, which they used to do, no? They would Latinize languages to Avicenna, okay? And he was the first physician to designate a 40-day isolation method. Kasi noon, ang daming epidemics, no? The plague, the kung ano-ano. And this was just not even medicine, just isolation, because the mode of transport noon was ships. No? Wala pang jumbo jets noon. So it was ships. And of course, the center of maritime trade was Venice. No? If you remember the Merchant of Venice. So to weaken the spread of epidemics, there was a mandatory period of 40 days that the ships would dock and people would not get down. No? So this was adopted by the merchants as the 40-day quarantena. In Arab, it was called Al-Arba'iniya, but the name that has come down to us is the quarantena or quarantine in English, meaning 40 days. But now it's just quarantine. So the reason that this is related to mangroves is because the most common mangrove species, Avicennia marina or api-api, was named after this great Persian physician, Ibn Sina or Avicenna. And this was the taxonomist Linnaeus, no? He named Avicennia marina, the genus Avicennia, after the great Persian physician Avicenna. So we look at traditional uses of Philippine mangroves from our book. May birth control, may anyway, I don't know. No, let me just continue. I don't know how to. Somebody wants to. Mm,
Sagutin mo lang at sabihin mo na ganyan.
yan na. Yung cellphone ko, pakisabi na lang na hindi pwede kasi meron akong
Saan ba?
lecture.
Diyan?
Ayan. Okay, so I'm back.
Yung cellphone mo.
Can we go back? I don't know. We can go back. I'll go back to sharing.
Yes, ma'am. You may share your
Where
presentation.
am I now? Where's my screen is here. I think it's here. I'll share it and then I'll yan lang yung cellphone ko, pakisagot na lang dyan. Sorry about that.
First and second saan yung cellphone mo? Yan ba?
Maybe you can share the other one, ma'am. The one you presented earlier. The presentation view. This is the
this supposed to be ito yung is this okay now?
Yeah, we can see the traditional uses of Philippine mangroves. Are you sharing that
Okay.
Certified. Perfect. Thank you.
And we have all the repellents, burns, epilepsy, and ito, nilakihan ko yung cosmetic, no? Because, so you can see so many traditional uses nung unang panahon. And this is one of them, the mangrove Soneratia cassiolaris. These are actually skin products yan, no? That these Indonesian friends of mine gave to me. It's body butter from this mangrove Soneratia cassiolaris. They're fruits. We have this species, but not so many. Pero sila, they have 30,000 hectares of this species. So they can really, tayo we have, in Capiz, we saw a small area na pwede, no? If there are students who would like to do this kind of research, I can show to them, I think 1,000 trees lang ngayon of this species. So 2 weeks ago, I was in Sarangani. We went to the mangroves and we saw again this species. Ang dami nilang big trees. This is it. And these are the fruits. Ito yung fruits lang ano, na pwedeng gawing cosmetic for cosmetic purposes. But anyway, I was in Sri Lanka in 2018. What they do, it was Sri Lanka, there was a scientific paper that described the bottling of apple juice of this mangrove species in collaboration, scientists and a people's organization, a Small Fishers Federation. So we tried the drink, masarap siya. Another mangrove species, saging-saging, has very pretty fruits. Ganito. So some guests of mine, sabi nila, they're Japanese girls actually, sabi nila, ang ganda. So they, pang aretos, what you call them, earrings. A sister species also as pretty, but iba ang form. But anyway, I come now to another species, that's Seriops tagal, called tungog or tangal. Actually, there's a town in Aklan called Tangalan after this species. But just to highlight that it is the bark of this species that is scraped and dried. And this one is coconut, no? You get the sap of coconut, you can drink it straight. But if you want to keep it, you have to preserve it. No? You have to add what they call a retardant or a mordant to kill the microorganisms. And that is this, what they call the baluk or the tungog, the powder from this tungog. Mangrove. So that's why tuba is brownish or reddish because of the color of the dye. And that is also why in the South, Visayas and Mindanao, the generic term for mangroves is katungan from tungog, the most valuable product in mangroves, from mangroves. In contrast, in the north, in Luzon, it's called bakawan. Kasi itong to the upper right, no? This is the most familiar mangrove to people there. So they call mangroves bakawan. But if you go to the south, sure, those of you in Zamboanga, you will know that it is katungan that the locals use. Another common mangrove is nipa, is a mangrove species. The shingles are important in rural Philippines for shelter. And the sap for vinegar, and the fruits also can be cooked, no, as sweetmeats of the fruits of nipa. And I got this photo from an old book because I would read that the shingles or the leaflets are also used as hats and raincoats. So I would guess ganito yung raincoats. Although this is another palm species, but the nipa raincoats would look similar to this. And more recently, this is laksoy or nipa wine. So again, traditional, this is a nipa grove, and the collector goes there, puts his container, collects the sap of the nipa, brings it to the place for 3 days to ferment, no? Ferment it for 3 days, then cook it here. It is a distillation process, actually. It's cooking so that you evaporate the water and you distill the alcohol to make Nipa wine or Laksoy. And this is done in Caraga, Surigao, and Agusan. And here, these are students from Butuan City going to this area where Laksoy is produced. And during the pandemic, COVID, when alcohol was in short supply, the students of Butuan University went to these places and produced alcohol from Nipa sap for use in downtown Butuan City. Okay, ano lang, okay, Calder na. So we come now to,
Sabihin ko na,
oo, sabihin mo, doon ka na sa labas. And this figure shows permanent residents from mangroves. Mangroves here, you can have fish and shellfish and shells, but there are species that are permanently in mangroves. They're called permanent residents. For example, the mud skipper. I think some of you are Cebuano speaking or Bisaya speaking. This is the tambasakan, no? The mud skipper. And we know that they are in mud, they live in mud, but during high tide, they skip over the mud. That's why they're called mud skippers. And they are very familiar in the folk song, si Pilimon, na masol sa kadagatan, nakakuha og islang tambasakan. Tambasakan is the mud skipper. And this is a wrong folk song because you do not get your mud skippers in the sea. You get the mud skippers in the mangroves, di ba? So it should be namasol sa katunggan, nakakuha o isdang tambasakan. So, rural places, we do have traditional ecological knowledge, but sometimes mali din yun. And some more gleaners, very important for food security of rural folks, no? These are shells. Women and children usually do this. And this is from Cebu, different species, but I focus on the imbaw, that's Anodontia. This is the second most expensive species of mangroves, shells from mangroves, usually sold steamed or as soup and sold by piece. No? So it's very expensive imbaw. Other mangroves. Next, paki-ano nga doon. Please tell her to stop calling. So, nandun sa kanya. I cannot end. Okay. Anyway, let's just ignore the noise, no? These are the animals in mangroves, birds, bats, crocodiles, fiddler crabs, shells. Okay, tell her to not to call me. Hindi nandun tinikas. Huwag lang silang tumawag. And finally, also insects, no? Butterflies and fireflies. Apologies really because we have a family crisis right now, but it's being handled. I'm the eldest of 10 children. That's why they come to me. I think you can understand that. Anyway, let us focus on the fireflies, no? Because this is a long story that I think it's more of history, but still it's related to mangroves. In Malaysia, there is a popular mangrove tour called the Firefly Tour. During the day, it looks like this. This is in Selangor. But at night, it looks like the central photo. These are all fireflies, and this is a close-up of the firefly. And in the Philippines, we also have this firefly. And we also have this tour in Iwahig River in Palawan, also in Bohol, I think there's a firefly tour, and a few other places. So, we come to Butuan. This is here, Agusan. This is the Butuan estuary. My home province, by the way. And the fireflies are found on this mangrove. What we saw earlier, no? Sonaratia casulariis. And I saw this species here in the Butuan estuary. By the way, let me warn you that this is a little bit of history, but the organizers have been generous, giving me an hour something plus plus. So I'll spend maybe 10 minutes, no? Kasi history natin ito eh. As Filipinos, I think it's very important. Anyway, this is now an old map of that estuary showing Masawa and Butuan, two places. But Masawa in Butuanon means bright, Masawa. And the brightness comes from the fireflies on these mangroves that lined the Butuan estuary in times past, no, not now. This is history, as I said. And of course, you know, this is the first mass, but here I focus on this book by my good friend, Greg Montiveros, A Fire on the Island. The fire referring not to actual fire, but to the fireflies, no? So this also goes to the question of where was the first mass? Masaw, that's Masawa. Masawa in Butuan is now Masaw, has been shortened, or Limasawa. And I think some of you have seen the old relics of the Balangay boats found in Butuan, dating to what, 300 AD, or more recently, 700 AD, but still old boats, no? 700 years after the birth of Christ AD, although I was told now it's called CE, Common Era, because not all places on the globe are Christians, so say we should not, you know, be presumptuous. So it's Common Era. And 2 years ago, these Balangay boats were built after these relics, and they sailed all over Southeast Asia, just wind, not just sailboats. And if we look at Pigafetta's account, no question, the mass was on Easter Sunday of the 31st of March, 1521, and he said the two chieftains were present, Raja Masawa, the Raja of Masawa, and the Raja of Butuan. Okay, that's from Pigafetta. You can look that up. So I'll just take 2 more slides on this topic because I think it's very important. A very recent paper, 2024, reconstructing the Philippines before 1521, the Calaga-Butuan Crescent. Calaga is Caraga at present. Butuan is Butuan. They use the Chinese spelling, the authors. So let's look at this map of Asia and Southeast Asia. First, we see the maritime triangle. Maritime meaning sea triangle, no, boats, shipping. And here we see Butuan, KPC, Caraga, Butuan Crescent. Then we have Vijaya and Champa. This is Vietnam at present. And the third angle is Palembang in Indonesia, the Srivijaya. So there was active trade here. And the notable migration routes are in red. These are the migration routes all the way to whatever this island is. And likely trade interactions here go all the way to India and to Africa. And actually, in terms of Africa, I have a good friend. As I said, I'm from Butuan. So Butuan collector who has an African artifact that was dug up somewhere here in Butuan. So here is Caraga, no, region, that's Surigao and Agusan. And the paper proposed the existence of the Calaga-Butuan Crescent, KPC, based on archaeology, textual evidence, ceramics, and genetic studies. And this kingdom existed for over 13 centuries and innovated in maritime technology like the Balangay boats. And finally, it was a sophisticated and influential center of Austronesian culture and maritime trade. So we go to the second slide. All these artifacts were collected in the Agusan, Surigao region. Take note, no? Here we have, these are metals, Shang Dynasty bronze, and the gold, of course. Many of you have seen the golden Tara, no, from Agusan River, which is now in the Chicago Field Museum, and these other golden artifacts. It's called the crescent because these artifacts were collected over, of course, decades in this crescent area, with the center in Butuan and Surigao, but going all the way here to Lanao, Baroy, and all the way to Samar, Gubat. So it's a crescent. That's why it's called the Calagap-Butuan Crescent. And the last slide on this topic, these are more artifacts collected from that crescent area that I showed to you. Look at the colors, green and blues and whites, and I don't know what you call this, dirty white. And if we look at these major Chinese dynastic periods here, these are all from the paper, by the way, Han, 6 dynasties, Tang, Song, Yuan. The colors, you match the colors of these artifacts, they go to the 6 dynasties, that's Old Yue and Celadon, Changsha, Yue again, in this period. And this is the period, the approximate kingdom period of over 13 centuries that this kingdom existed. And this is Butuan of 1,000 years, another book by my good friend, because it was over 1,000 years that the kingdom of Butuan existed. Here, this arrow here. And we are only familiar with 1521, no, when Magellan came. And that was the Ming Dynasty. And we are all familiar with the blues and whites of the Ming Dynasty. But that's much, much later. Much earlier, we had the kingdom of Butuan here, as shown by the evidence, by the ceramic evidence, very extensive ceramic evidence. So I think that should, for those of you from Mindanao, that should really challenge you. And if you're interested, I can send you a copy of the paper. Let's go now to the present. Tapos na yung ating prehistory. Islands was mentioned. We have one of the longest coastlines, and the islands look very, very nice, no? When there are no typhoons, of which we have more than 20 a year. And when the super typhoons come, ay nako. Like Yolanda, the strongest to make landfall, category 5, no, in 2013. And here we see to the right, typhoons, hurricanes, cyclones, they're all the same. They are storm events. And if you notice, 30% of them are found in the Philippines, a good 1/3. So no wonder we have many deaths, no, from the typhoons. Supposed to be Yolanda, 6,000 officially, but actually, those of you who have been there, it's more like 15,000 total deaths. But even before that, meron ng 20,000. So really a lot of fatalities. And the upper right shows the intensity. Below is the frequency. Here is the intensity of the typhoons. With climate change, the frequency has not increased. It's the same, 20, 22, 24, ganyan. But it's the intensity that has changed. More super typhoons with climate change. So we have the damage here of $15 billion, although in Wiki it just said $2 billion, but much, much more damage. So before we go to mitigation, I made these types of waves because I think this is the kind of material we should have in our instructional materials, now for even elementary and high school. What are these? Of course, we have tides, we have waves, we have storm surge, and we have tsunami. I'd like to focus on the last two kasi when Yolanda came, all the radio announcers and the TV hosts were saying, oh, the tsunami is coming when Yolanda came. And in fact, it was not a tsunami. No? So let's look at the comparison. They have the same wave height to 8 meters, here 2 to 40 meters. But the wavelength, you have 2 orders of magnitude. Your storm surge will only go 4 km, like what we saw with Yolanda inland, but your tsunami will go up to 350 km. No? 100 times more than your storm surge. That is the first difference between the tsunami and storm surge. The second is the source, the mechanism. Whereas the storm surge is from the air, it's atmospheric, no? Wind stress. The tsunami is from the earth. It's volcanic eruptions, landslides. So these are the two major differences that actually Filipinos should know. Maski grade 1 pa lang sila, no? And yet even our, I don't know, our senators don't know this difference. So there's something wrong really with our educational system. These are the disasters that we should really learn about sa ano pa lang. So here we see wind waves, we see storm surge and the tsunami that just goes on and on and on. It goes kilometers in length. So you can teach actually arithmetic to school children, no? By comparing storm surge and tsunami, what volume was the volume of water, and it's very simple. Going back to Yolanda, post Yolanda, this is now the bay, Cancabato Bay in Leyte. And here is the airport where my niece and her husband stayed because they were air traffic controllers. So here's the airplane, that's the airport. But she was about to give birth to a baby. So my brother went to Tacloban, stayed in their house while they were at the hospital downtown. So that night of Yolanda, he was told to look for the laptops, the computers, and, secure them. So which is what he was about to do. But in that morning, when he opened the door, he could see the storm surge coming in. So he rushed up to the second floor. When he opened the windows, he saw the neighbors jumping into the water. So that is what he did. He jumped to the water. And lucky for him, I forgot my slide. There was a big tree there that was steady, and he hid under the tree while all around him, people were being, brought by the waves, by the storm surge, and lost their lives. So he just stayed there under that tree for how many hours until the storm surge died down. And he walked, of course. After Yolanda, we all know what happened. There was nothing, nothing in Tacloban. So he had to walk from the airport here with, glass all over the street, with salt in his eyes and wounds in his legs. He walked until he got to the hospital in downtown. I don't know how many hours it took. But all of us Filipinos who had relatives in Tacloban, in Leyte, in 2013, know the days. That was Friday. Saturday, Sunday, there was no communication, no cell phones, no nothing. We did not know what was happening, what had happened to our loved ones. So my brother, me in Iloilo, a sister in Zamboanga, two sisters in LA, a brother in New York, a sister in Geneva. In Cebuano, the term was nangalisang. Nangalisang kaming tanan because for 2 days we did not know if our brother was still alive or not. And this experience is the experience of all. And if only for this, we should really keep our mangroves so we have some. Anyway, so this is the tree where my brother hid for so many hours while the storm was raging. And this is downtown where he had to walk how many kilometers. So in the wake of Yolanda, PH said we would plant 1 billion pesos or $22 million worth of mangroves, about 2,000 hectares of coastline. So we asked the question, a group of NGOs, I was with the NGO, and academicians, do we need to plant 1 billion pesos worth of mangroves? And so what we did was we did a survey of mangroves in Leyte and Samar. So this is Eastern Samar, that was my group, and another group looked at Leyte. We started with Anahaw Island in General MacArthur. And to make it short, these are the sites, the Samar group where we surveyed the mangroves, and we've looked at the kind of mangroves, plantations or natural, and we looked at number damage, dead, and so on, and the species that were there. And we found that plantations had the massive damage, whereas natural mangroves here had minimal damage. So if we look at the kind of mangrove, the plantation were mostly Bacau, Rhizophora. Here, plantation, Rhizophora, and so mostly the Bacau were killed. And we published our results both in scientific peer-reviewed journals in 2016, as well as in spreadsheets in popular media like this Inquirer. And one of the papers that we published from that survey explains why Bacau mangroves were the ones that were killed by the storm. Okay, so just very slowly. On the x-axis here is the age of the Bacau plantations, okay, in years. On the y-axis here is the percent damage of the Bacau. And if we look at the yellow line, that's 50% damage, and we go down, that's 27 years. At 27 years old, a Bacau plantation will suffer 50% damage from a storm. And if you look at the red line, that's almost 195% of your Bacau plantation will die at 32 years. Actually, the age is just a proxy for the height. No, it's the height of the mangroves. When they reach this height, 50% will die. When they reach this height, almost all of them will die with a storm like Yolanda. So here's the wind damage that I referred to, and the paper where it was published. And this is by Villamor et al., 2016. Before the typhoon, you see here the Bacau, no? You know the prop roots. By the way, I noted the report that you showed. Those were all Bacau that you had planted because of the prop roots. Anyway, before the typhoon, you have here the growth and the young trees. With the typhoon, what happens is the wind comes this way, hits the trees, and you have complete damage. The trees here in the center, they die. Just the trees at the sides that are not tall enough to be hit by the storm. So, this explains why Bacau is so vulnerable to storms, because a plant will grow from its part or tissue called the meristem. That's the growth area. If it is at the tip or apex, it's called the apical meristem. And Bacau do not have absent. The apical meristem is absent. So when it dies, it dies. But in contrast, this is pagatpat and other natural species, natural growing mangroves. They have this meristem. So initially, the leaves fall, the branches break, but then with the meristem that regrows, then you have shoots appearing, like here. And so they recover, they are resilient. This photo is very clear from Leyte. After Yolanda, this Bacau to the right, they're all dead. And the pagatpat and other natural species to the left, they're all alive. So this is really the reason we say, do not plant Bacau. Like here, this is pagatpat in December 2013. You think this tree is dead. So you would say, go and cut down the tree. But no, you go after 1 month, you see that the shoots have reappeared, no? So it is resilient. So these are really the trees that should be planted along the seafront. So now we come to the uses of mangroves. Here we have importance, coastal protection, carbon, that all of these were mentioned earlier, wildlife, and I have encircled coastal protection. In this time of climate change, that is the most important, as can be seen in this valuation. 2011 paper, up to $9,000 to $11,000 per hectare is the value of coastal protection of a given mangrove compared to the other uses. So this is another paper now that I was part of the authorship in 2008, published in Science. The question was, given a mangrove area, what is the highest value you can get for the different uses? These are the various uses and services: aquaculture, shrimp, the wood, the fisheries, coastal protection. And we can see red is here. So we found in our study that the value in terms of net present value in US dollars was here at the point of 8 square kilometers out of 10, right here. And then it levels off, no? So it means that if you combine all of these together, but you keep 80% of the mangroves, then you will get a maximum net present value of $16 million. So 80 to 20 is 4-to-1 mangrove to pond ratio. This is the ratio we should keep for environmental sustainability. We are not saying do not touch the mangroves. Yes, we can touch, we can clear the mangroves, but we should keep 4 units of mangroves to every 1 unit that we change. So here we look now at present in the Philippines. A long time ago, we had up to 500,000 hectares. In 2003, we had parity because of the planting, no? The mangroves increased, the mangroves decreased, the ponds increased, but with planting, the mangroves increased. At present, we have parity, what we call tabla, but science tells us we should have a 4-to-1 ratio. Therefore, we need to plant, need to rehabilitate a lot of our mangroves. And this we can do by planting the seafront, planting on seagrasses, and abandoned pond reversion. So let's look at each of those 3. This is the classic seafront planting in Kamsur in 2013. They planted 1 million mangroves. Here we can see the 7,000 volunteers that planted just in one day, the El Verde movement. Problem is that the species was Rhizophora here, whereas the species that you find along the coastline is Avicennia marina. So wrong species because of a lack of science, no science. And a friend of mine in May 2016 did a count. After 4 years after planting, he did quadrats, he counted, and he found less than 2% survival of the 1.009 million propagules planted. What a waste, no? Waste of effort, waste of money, waste of everything, just because science was not used. And even now we see, run for the mangroves, it's still Bacau, that's Bacau, back to the mangroves, Bacau, even in gasoline stations, t-shirts, Guinness Book Record programs. Why is Bacau so popular? These are the propagules of Bacau. This is Bacau babae, Bacau lalaki, because they are so long. They're so easy to source. Whereas your Piapi, these are small, they need a nursery. The Pagatpat, Sonorati alba are smaller, they need a nursery. So the planting is really by convenience, not by ecology. And those of you who know Bisaya, the joke is that with bakaw, you just tusok here, you tusok there, and you tusok everywhere. And the term for the propagules is tungki. And in fact, many people think all mangroves are tungki. That is their term for mangroves because of the bakaw propagules. These are the three mangrove sisters, the three most common. Here's the piapi or bungalon, Avicennia marina. Here's the pagatpat, Sonorati alba, and here's the bakaw. You know the bakaw because of the propagules, very big and so easy to source and to plant, and the roots, no, the prop roots. But if we look at the texts, you will see bakaw is here at the back, hiding behind your pagatpat and your piapi. Even here, even in this text, along the seafront, you do not find your bakaw along the seafront. So they should really not be planted along the seafront. What should we plant? This is pagatpat, Sonorati alba. Let me focus first on this in Bindoy, Negros. This is an old picture because that's me and my cousin. And this is a photo of her mother 50 years ago in the same forest. So if you compare the trees, this is how fast a pagatpat tree will grow if it is protected, no? There. And here is in Ahuy, Iloilo. This is another pagatpat tree which was harmed, cut by local people maybe for fuel, but afterwards the area was protected. And so somehow the pagatpat recovered, no? And this is what we mean when we say mangroves are resilient. They are resilient. They can recover from stresses, the right species. So in 2007, I had a project in Dumangas, Iloilo with the mayor, and these people, local people, are planting because the mayor said, I will wed you, I'll marry you for free. These are people who were not married, living in sin, supposed to be, in the eyes of God and man. So he said, I will give you a free wedding if you plant mangroves. So this is what they planted. The piapi were killed by the algae that grew, but not the pagatpat. This is Sonaratia alba here. Because Sonaratia, even with the barnacles, you know, they stand tall and firm and they can survive. So, by the way, after the planting, yeah, they were all wed by this mayor in 2007. So I hope more mayors, you know, follow his birthday celebration to have free weddings for people who cannot afford, but so long as they plant. And this is now the area where we planted 2007, 4 years after the pagatpat started to flower. And this is in 2019, and it has been a site for visits of all kinds of groups here planting. And this was 2 years ago. And now this is in local governance in Iloilo. Tree planting is required for weddings, baptisms, and burials. And this same pagatpat area was featured, by the way, 2 years ago in BBC News, and also British Broadcasting Corporation. And this is another free wedding. You can see if the ladies are in white, they have to plant mangroves. This is in Palawan. Of course, in Palawan, you have the seafront. You have many protected coves, so they can plant bakaw. So now we come to seed propagation for Sonorati alba. This is 2012, and yet it has not been applied, no, in mangrove planting. It's still bakaw and bakaw, not pagatpat, although already the protocols for seed propagation for nursery were available. By the way, this name, Roberto Balion, this is the Ramon Magsaysay awardee of a year ago or last year. Yeah, Dudoy Balion. Some of you may know him. And in GSL, that's my NGO, we have a site in Ahuy where now we have made a breakthrough in nursery germination of pagatpat, and our PO members, by the way, most of them are females somehow, because I think they have more patience than the males. They have produced thousands and thousands of pagatpat seedlings here, as you can see. One major problem, though, is the predation. You see here, you can count only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 survivors. Most of them are dead. Here they are dead because of predation by crabs. Here are crabs, by shells, by slugs, many predators like pagatpat leaves. So I looked at old photos of mine in Dumangas. This is a tall pagatpat tree, and this one was a goat that kept jumping and hitting at the leaves. So I said, what was so good about the leaves? I also saw this in Bantayan, Cebu. Their pagatpat look like bonsai because they cut the branches, they cut the leaves, and they feed to their goats and their cows. So the leaves of pagatpat are really, really delicious. That's why they have high mortality, low survival, because many predators like to eat them. So last month in Sarangani, in Alabel, a group of us with DNR and with the protected area staff, we had a pagatpat grove in Alabel, and we tried the leaves of pagatpat, and you can see them really munching on the leaves. So indeed, the leaves are delicious, and that's why the mortality in nursery is very high. So, if you are science-based, the question is, how can I prevent the predation? And then you can go ahead and produce your pagatpat seedlings for the seedlings required for seafront planting and not bakaw. Pagatpat is very common along the coastline. The coastlines that are not degraded, like here, this is in Ahuy. You see old pagatpat trees there with students. And I had another project in 2005 with another PO, People's Organization, where we planted piapi, Avicennia marina, and pagatpat. Here, very nice, from the nursery. This was the barangay captain and the People's Organization members. After 3 weeks, they were very, very nice, very healthy. After 3 months, they were very dead because here, we had planted here 50 meters away. Looked very nice for planting during low tide. But when high tide came, they were very flooded, and that was why they died. Because what happened was that we had planted here that was below mean sea level. And if you look at this text, the mangroves are above mean sea level. So we had planted in the wrong site. Mangrove definition as intertidal plants is that most of the time, 70% of the time, they are above mean sea level. But if you plant in locations like this, 70% of the time they are flooded, and then they will die. So if we look at the science, always, I'm a scientist as I was introduced. This is the elevation of marine habitats, okay? This is your mean sea level. Then you have mangroves here. This is the low tide. You have seagrasses around there to subtidal. Then you have your coral reefs there. Coral reefs, seagrasses, mangroves. For planting, you plant upper intertidal, the middle intertidal about mean sea level, but not lower intertidal and not subtidal. So this is the science and this is the technology that should be applied. But what do we see? These are mostly from Facebook. Here, the water, the tide is coming in. So this is obviously lower intertidal. And here, not only is the site wrong, by the way, this is Miss Earth. No, these are really photo ops. But they are planting so small, very small. You cannot even see the mangroves they are planting. So I think the point really here is not to have new mangroves, but to have a nice photo ops. And that is the main problem of our mangrove planting here. It's really the photo ops. Okay, let's look now at the mangrove area in the Philippines. We used to have 500,000 hectares, but going down with fish pond development until 2000, when all of a sudden the area doubled. And we said, what was happening? And it turned out that there were 26,000 hectares of planting under JB, ADB, World Bank here. And these are the multi-million pesos investment on all these planting projects. So this was the source of the increase in mangrove area. But the problem is that a lot of them were planted on seagrass beds. So as you're increasing your mangrove area, you are decreasing the seagrass area. And seagrasses are important because that is where your sea horses, sea turtles, your dugongs, your danggits, starfishes live. If you turn them into mangroves, all these animals will disappear. So this is not really rehabilitation, but transformation. Robbing Peter, and that's the seagrasses, to pay Paul, and that's the mangroves, which is really an ecological no science at all. We can see here, going back to 1950s in Bohol, you know that it's a plantation because it's very straight, no? Here, these are all bacao. 1957, this is 2015, it's still the same wrong practices. There's no learning, no science. You see, these are all seagrasses. The dark areas are seagrasses, and they have planted bacao there. They planted tall bacao, by the way, so that the bacao survived, about 2-meter tall bacao. So here in Bohol, these are traps for the swimming crab, or tunos, or alimasag. In Bisaya, it's kasag. All the swimming crabs will disappear when you have a mangrove plantation because they are used to seagrass beds. So this fisherman will lose his livelihood. In contrast, this is what a natural api-api growth will be. You know it's a plantation, no? Because you have the squares. So now we come to the question, what can we do with these waves, strong waves? Here's a paper 2013 that says that mangroves can provide storm protection, that's climate change, can sequester blue carbon, again, that's climate change, dissipate wave energy. Another paper, 2007 from Tanaka, this is energy dissipation by your vegetation. But my most favorite is really this 2012 paper that says that the energy of waves can be reduced, attenuated, absorbed by physical factors such as the slope, topography, depth, and especially the biological factors of the trees that are there. And reviewing 100 or more papers, they concluded that if you want to reduce the energy of just regular waves and the waves from storm surge to 60% reduction, you need 100-meter wide green belt. If you want all the energy to be absorbed, then it must be 1/2 kilometer. But let us stick to 100 meters wide green belt. And let us look at what we have in the Philippines. This is Palawan with its pristine mangroves. We see here mangroves where the high tide goes. At the back is the beach forest where you don't have a gradual slope, no? Because mangroves need a gradual slope. Where you have a steep slope, then you have a beach forest. But if we look at the country, we see a coconut forest mostly. And coconuts are not helpful when the storms come. You can see from here, all these images, no? Coconuts are absolutely not helpful. And this one, they do not have any green belt at all. This is Nasipit, Agusan, Iloilo, and this is in Misamis. Despite all the ordinances that we see going back to 1975, requiring a 20-meter wide mangrove strip, in 1986, 50 to 100 meters along shorelines in storm surge areas. 1986 already, it was there, but no compliance. Here is Siargao, no? Siargao residents were saved by the mangroves from Odette because they have their mangrove greenbelt there. So we see greenbelts. This is in Iloilo. You can have fish ponds, but you can have your greenbelts in front of fish ponds. This one is a planted greenbelt in Aklan. Maybe some of you have been to the Bacau Eco Park. This is in Vietnam, more of a beach forest greenbelt. And this is in Thailand. This is not only 100 meters, this is 1 kilometer. But at the back, you look, you have the shrimp ponds. So aquaculture and mangroves can coexist, actually. Now, in 2016, after Yolanda, a group of us went to Leyte, which was really hit by Yolanda, no? In Palok. We went to this island, bare sand, you can see here, and that's me encircled in yellow. We recommended to the local people to plant beech forest because here, this is too unprotected. If you have something like this, you cannot plant mangroves. You'll have very strong winds. So we recommended you plant beech forest. And we went back in 2022 and they did plant. These are beech forest trees. That's the island now. It's full of beech forest species here at the back, beech forest. That is proof of concept, no? That you can have a green belt, whether mangroves or beech forest. So in 2014, after Yolanda, we helped draft a bill, Coastal Greenbelt Bill, requiring 100 meters of vegetation. You remember that science? And asked Senator Bam Aquino to sponsor it, which he did. And the next year, Congressman Batocabe sponsored it in the lower house. Unfortunately, he was killed and Bam Aquino lost the election. So 2014 and 10 years down the line, every year they make a new bill. It has not yet been passed, as if it's not an urgent bill, no? It's life and death, and yet it's not really important. The latest is that the Greenbelt Bill has been incorporated into the Integrated Coastal Management Bill. So anyway, if you have any lobbying staff, then maybe they can help push for that ICM passage. In the meantime, forget about the national government. We look at the local governments. In Negros Occidental, in the last Para El Mar celebration, I think last year, in Cebu, Negros Occidental was awarded a prize for being the first province to establish a network of local coastal greenbelt zones. And this is their executive order here. And here it says to establish greenbelts. This invokes, by the way, the local government code. It's there in the local government code, RA 7160. You don't need to, to look far for the basis for a green belt. And here are the municipalities in Negros Occidental that are covered by this green belt. An example is San Enrique. And here, what it's supposed to do, inventory the coastline, reforest, revert abandoned ponds, and remove illegal structures. This is what local governments have to do. Let us not hope and depend on the national government. I think with the Mandanas ruling, giving local governments really trillions of pesos, if they can get it, then there is funding for this. However, this is a main problem of our coastal green belts, actually. It's not just the national support. Well, it's national in a way. It's DPWH because if you look here, this is Sorsogon, a coastal highway. Very clearly, these are mangroves. So mangroves here, this is a mangrove here and mangrove there. Mangroves were cleared to build this coastal highway. Here, it's a little bit better because it's not directly to the sea. But here again, we got from Facebook a plea from somebody in Romblon complaining about the causeway projects of DPWH, especially in the coastal areas, impacting significantly the mangrove areas. And this is not just in Romblon, in Sorsogon, but this is in Davao. You see this, you can find this in YouTube. I have the YouTube here. Very clearly, you can see that here you have mangroves and there's a river, but lower part has been turned into highway. So the mangroves here were cleared. The mangroves here still remain. So this is a main threat really to the coastal greenbelt and to the mangroves of the country, because I was informed that this project is funded by DRRM, Disaster Risk Reduction, by providing coastal seawalls and coastal highways. So I don't know what's happening, no? The DENR and the DPWH are not talking. And the problem is that the DPWH has the money, has a lot of money. So this is where all our coastal greenbelts will go. Now let's look at another success story that we have. Problem with coastlines are the storms. So we have a lot of gray engineering, all these concrete structures, and we know they are not very effective. We see this all over the country. So in Panay Island, where we are, here in Ahoy, we have a severe case of coastal erosion, 1 meter more the erosion of the substrate. So we decided to start a green-gray engineering project. Green meaning the mangroves and gray meaning the stones, no? And we went to Coastal Consultancy Group, AMH. They looked at all the data from NAMRIA, again science-based. They measured the tide levels for 1 week. Based on science, they designed breakwaters to build. And these are the breakwaters that were installed by the members of the local PO, People's Organization here. And yeah, those are breakwaters. Here we see 10 years after, we can see the breakwaters, the rocks now down, and the gray engineering and the green engineering. This is the president of the PO. And during lectures in their headquarters, made of nipa, it's a nipa hut headquarters. And he was a very good leader. He passed away 2 years ago. So when GSL built now a concrete structure for the PO to replace the nipa hut, we named it after him, Elmer Babiera Learning Center. That's him. Very good leader, community leader. Now, when we were doing this for more than 10 years now, every year we would measure the elevation, no? After putting up the breakwaters. So you can see this was the original elevation of the substrate going up by up to 50 centimeters or more. This is the group. And it so happened we had Japanese scientists that helped us here, a friend of mine. And all of these have been published in scientific journals. Here, this is the Philippines, this is in Thailand, 3 papers that describe this project. And not only dissemination through journals, because of course the People's Organization do not read the scientific journals. Our Japanese scientist, my friend, gave a lecture to the fishers, the fisher folk. Of course, there was a translator. But you can, bring the science to the people. Why not? Now, this is now the aerial view, 2011 of the site. This is where the erosion took place. You see the erosion here? And you can see the mangroves on both sides there. So we put the breakwaters here, 70 meters and 110 meters here, right after construction. Then 8 years after, we started planting at the back to protect so that the breakwaters would protect the mangroves. Now, 2024, this is now solid mangrove and 100 meters in compliance with the requirement, of a green belt of 100 meters. And from the ground, this was last year. You see, this is the breakwater in 2011. That's a breakwater 2011 photo. And yeah, and this was just last year. You can see now here, the breakwater with the mangroves. The breakwater you cannot see here because the mangroves are already tall. So this is how you do green-gray engineering project. We have also another site in Capiz where we had all these plantings. So forming a green belt, no, along the coastline. But the National Breeding Program came in, and our PO, People's Organization, said to us, what should we do? Because, they wanted to plant 60 hectares in the wrong site. And so we advised them, just go ahead and plant, you get the money, because they were paid. But as expected, there was 5% survival because of the wrong planting, the wrong site. Whereas earlier, we had planted about 6 hectares, proper site, and we had up to 80% survival here, if you have a science basis. We also monitor the survival, what we do. So here, I think 60 to 80%, for Avicennia marina, and maybe 40 to 50% Sonaratia alba over 2 to 3 years should be okay. You have a healthy mangrove there. And this is another problem of most mangrove planting. You plant and you forget. You should monitor, what's happening to your plants. Are they alive? Are they surviving? Are they healthy? That's not happening. So we also document all our learnings. This is for mangrove rehabilitation and eco park, pond reversion, training, and we have all these materials. So now we come to the second strategy. No, not second. The third strategy for mangrove rehabilitation is reversion of abandoned ponds. Okay? Because this is before you had a lot of mangroves, after you have a lot of fish ponds. So we have done seafront planting, low survival, seagrass planting, high survival, but you kill a lot of seagrasses. Whereas we should focus on pond reversion, because this is where mangroves used to be, They were cleared to make into fish ponds. So it should be easy to bring them back to mangroves. Now we have a lot of ordinances, again, going back to 1990, to revert abandoned ponds to mangroves, all of these. But again, there's no enforcement. Now, this is our site in Leganes, Iloilo, 2005 to 2014. You see here, 2005, and then when we came in 2014, we have complete mangrove cover. Now, let us first look at the different forests, because we are talking about carbon sequestration. Because as we know, global warming is due to all the greenhouse gases, number one of which is carbon. And if we can capture that carbon, then we reduce global warming. So forests and their trees are supposed to do that. But if we look at the different kinds of forests, here will show the highest carbon capture or carbon sequestration. And the highest is mangroves. Our mangroves are here, like this. All the other forests, the tropical, upland, temperate, boreal, here, boreal, peat swamp, lowland, all of them have very low rates of carbon sequestration. So for this reason, mangroves are also critical in climate
Yun
change
na,
adaptation.
almost 11. Mapagtuloy pang aming
Hello?
It's okay, ma'am. We
Okay.
have committed it. Thank you.
Okay, let me, I think last two topics. So this paper says the jumbo carbon footprint of a shrimp, because, you know, the supo is called the jumbo shrimp. So the jumbo carbon footprint of a shrimp, carbon losses when you convert a mangrove into a shrimp pond. This is, by the way, in Indonesia, this paper. So when you have a mangrove forest, the amount of carbon is 844. Here, 844 megagrams carbon per hectare. When you convert it into a shrimp pond, the carbon goes down to 358 megagrams carbon. So the difference, what happened to this difference? 800 minus 300, about 500 megagrams. This all went to the atmosphere. This all added to global warming. So aquaculture, if you clear mangroves to build aquaculture ponds, you are really adding to global warming and adding to climate change. So the solution is to bring back abandoned ponds back to mangroves. And the Philippines, which according to this paper is number 15 in terms of carbon holdings here, we will show the carbon holdings that we have, no, if we do this reversion of abandoned ponds. Now here is another paper that we did, because our GSL, we have scientists, no? So we also do research. This looked at carbon capture or sequestration in different areas in Panay. So oops. This is an abandoned fish pond. This is a plantation that you saw earlier, and this is a natural mangrove. Okay. These are the results, the carbon holdings that these different mangroves have in terms of megagrams carbon per hectare, from 50 all the way to 850 megagrams carbon per hectare. The highest, as we can see, by the way, this is upside down because this is below ground, no? The highest we have is in the abandoned ponds. Next, we have in the natural mangroves. And in the plantations, we have very low carbon sequestration. But anyway, it still does capture carbon. But what is interesting here is that here, it's reversion of abandoned ponds that will give you really a lot of carbon capture. So what happens here now? If you have a pond and a mangrove, okay. First, we saw that we have permanent residents, no, in this mangrove. These permanent residents are mudskippers and shellfish that the local community depend on for food security. No, these are fisher folk that are harvesting mangroves in this mangrove. If when the juveniles here go out, because you have transients also, you have juvenile fish, when they go out, then they become fish that are caught offshore, no? This one is in Palau, that's why they have very good fishing boats. And this is in the Philippines. But anyway, the mangroves also have this nursery function where the baby fish and crabs and shrimp use the mangroves as a nursery. And then when they are big enough, they go out and they are caught as part of the fisheries. So the fish food from mangroves is both local food security and also offshore commercial fisheries. But when you convert it to a fish pond, you make a dike here, this will stop the water from going out and the larvae from going out. No, there will be no more juvenile fish going out, and there will be no more juvenile fish coming in because the dikes of the fish pond prevent it. So all the production will go to the fish pond. A simpler show of this is here you have a pond and here you have a mangrove. You have a mangrove and you have a pond. In the mangroves, you have local shellfish, no? That's capture fisheries, both in the mangrove and outside the mangroves. In the fish pond, you have the aquaculture pond. You'll produce bangus, crabs, tilapia, shrimp, like that. But only for consumption, only for markets, compared to here for food security. So this is a debate that's ongoing because in the move to regenerate abandoned ponds back to mangroves, the DNR is for this, is pushing for this. Abandoned ponds that are no longer used should be brought back to mangroves. But the BFAR is against this because BFAR says, oh, if you do that, you will be compromising food security of the country because we should have the fish ponds. So how valid is this? Let's take a look. If we have mangroves, we have fisheries products, as we saw, no? So that you have food security. But we also have storm protection, flood regulation, forestry products. So we have not only food, but services with this value and many beneficiaries if you have mangroves. If you have fish ponds, you also have food security because you produce milkfish, tilapia, shrimp. But that's all. You have no other services. And the sectors will only be your aquaculturists, the pond operators, and the aquaculture industry, the feed suppliers, and so on, when you have this. So when you have mangroves, you have social equity. You see the houses. If you go to fish ponds, you need a lot of money. But if you have mangroves, you have all kinds, low-income people, you have better social equity with mangroves. So, for these reasons, why should we revert abandoned ponds? For social equity, food security, higher carbon rates, as we saw, and to maintain all these goods and services. So actually, this should really go into a poster and infographics for those who are against reversion of abandoned fish ponds. And I think the last two topics now is an example of a reverted pond. In Leganes, Iloilo, about 15 hectares of abandoned ponds. You can see 2009, by 3 years, we had full mangrove cover of the 15 hectares. And by 2014, the mayor, the one with the star here, inaugurated an eco park. He said, oh, he was so excited. He said, let's have an eco park for the 15 hectares. And this was the inauguration with GSL, my colleagues there. That's 2014. And 2022, the Nipa hut was replaced by a concrete structure because of funding, donations from private and government sector. And by that time, the old mayor had passed away. His grandson, again with the yellow star, is now the present mayor, and inaugurated this new center with the British ambassador here. This was still COVID, as you can see from all our face masks. So how was this reversion of 15 hectares done? Here, September 2009 to 2015, at least 86,000 mangrove seedlings were bagged by these volunteers, students, Rotary, schools, high schools, 86,000 seedlings were bagged and were eventually planted. And I like this photo because normally we do not allow young children to join in the planting, no, for obvious reasons. But this 5-year-old boy from Iloilo really pleaded with his parents, his family, and they reached out to us and we said, okay, sure, so long as you are with him. And he helped with the planting. But that was an exception because actually we did not know it, but soon after, I think the next year, he passed away for other reasons. But at least we're happy that he was able to plant mangroves. Now, here is what happens if you do not assist. What we did was we assisted natural regeneration. No? This one is no assistance. If you don't assist, it will take 15 to 20 years for the mangroves to come back. But if you have active planting of the same species by all those volunteers, then in 3 years you have full cover. And this is why we advocate for assisted natural regeneration, unlike European and American mangrove experts who say, do not touch the mangroves, you just let nature do its course. But you know, in 1 year, Philippines has 20 typhoons. So you have 15 years before the mangroves will come. So each year you have 20 typhoons. 15 times 20 typhoons is you have hundreds of typhoons during which you have no coastal protection because you want to just let nature do its course. So that is the answer that we give when people say that we should not touch the mangroves. Here, this one, it took 20 years for this mangrove to go back for this abandoned pond to go back to full mangroves. And we have students that do the planting. In this case, a school, 39 students. And in one day, they planted how many? 3,000 seedlings to fulfill their academic requirements. So they graduated. They are now, I think they graduated criminology. They are now policemen and all kinds of professionals. The local government provided their hotel in the office of the Menro. We, the NGO, we provided technical expertise and also expenses. So it's really a win-win-win political networking strategy. And for these strategies, there is second strategy which pertains to labor. What we do is we pay because, no, we do not require payment because if you pay, it reduces planting to a business transaction. No? The fisher folk, they plant, you pay, tapos na. Bahala na if the mangroves die. It doesn't matter, they're paid. But if their labor is their counterpart, no, to give them or as basis for their ownership, then they have ownership of the mangrove, which obligates them to care for the mangroves until maturity. So that is why we provide food and transport, we provide the seedlings, but we do not pay because as one NGO, here I have Cebuano because supposed to be Zamboanga, but anyway, the Tagalog will just get the context. The Katungan, the mangroves, tell the planters, when I protected you from the typhoons Yolanda, Pedring, Undoy, did I ask for payment from you? And now that you are going to replant in areas where mangroves have died, you need to be paid. So that's the mangroves asking, really, for us, this is the basis why we do not pay. We do not pay, but we make make it easier for other factors to give ownership to the local communities. So here, I think we're going to Eco Park lastly. This is the 15-hectare Eco Park, the old Mabuhat, which is now replaced by concrete. But it is a showcase for the voluntary labor that I described, mangrove reversion of abandoned ponds, a coastal greenbelt, by the way, it's 200 meters, and a mangrove eco park it is now. So all this experience has been documented in our manual on mangrove reversion and also in our manual for trainers, mangrove training courses, because these are trainees that we have that visit our mangrove sites, our successful mangrove project sites. And the Eco Park, now we're going to the last topic. The Eco Park came about because the local government officials of Leganes visited this original Eco Park, again, ZSL supported, in Ibahay. It's called Katungan It Ibahay, or KII. And this is how it looks now, that the information center has been improved. And if you join our training courses, this is what will happen to you. So we said that climate change mitigation is through protection of remaining forests, like this eco park. And one way really to protect forests, mangroves, is by making them an eco park. So this now is Panay, Northern Panay in Aklan. This is that area in Ibahay. And this is the mangrove area, 100 hectares. You can see the species, 27 species of mangroves, very diverse actually. But of the 100 hectares or so, maybe 40 hectares have been declared by the local government, the LGU, as protected as an eco park. And this was also the area where we did most of our field work when we wrote our mangrove book, because it has a very high species diversity. Those are my co-authors of the book that maybe some of you have seen. This one is out of print, by the way, and it's being sold on Amazon and in the internet as an antique for $100. Yes, really. And these were, complimentary copies, because Amazon describes, on the title page, it says compliments of UNESCO and Safe Lake Aquaculture. So it means a free complimentary copy given to some government or some university was sold by whoever received it on the internet. Talagang, ay nako, kaano ng mga Pinoy, no? But anyway, the crown jewel of that eco park is what we call the avatar tree, Avicennia rumphiana. It's about 3 meters, 3.5 meters. And ang diameter is about 9 meters. So we asked the question, how many persons to go around? And to make the story short, the answer is 9 if a combination. Pero kung all Asians, baka 11. Kasi short tayo. If all Caucasians, baka 7 lang kasi tall sila. Anyway, this avatar tree shows you, gives a good illustration of the carbon sequestration. Kasi what we see here, no, the trees and branches, the leaves and branches, comprise only this small portion in red of the carbon that is captured by the mangroves. Most of the carbon is below ground. This one in yellow, it is below ground. So existing mangrove forests should really be protected because they are carbon storehouses, a lot of carbon, no? So I hope in your sites, in your locations, you have mangroves that you can protect and develop as an eco park. In terms of, that's the size. In terms of age, we tried to age it, but we could not. So we just compared a similar sized mangrove, although it's hardly surviving. The center of it is dead, but it is Avicennia marina, the same genus, the same size, and they radiocarbon dated it in Australia to 738 years. So we just say that our own avatar tree is 700 to 800 years old. So that's centuries old. No, it's an old mangrove. And it's supposed to be the largest mangrove in Asia. So this is the timeline of that mangrove. 1990, we first saw it. And then actually, before that, 1980s, villagers prevented its conversion into a fish pond. Because already, in part of the mangroves, we saw this. There's a part where you have the dike and you have a gate. So it was already on its way to becoming fish pond. But the local people said, this will flood our town. So they stopped the bulldozers and the chainsaws. And 1996 was when we from CFDEC saw it for the first time. And a lot of things happened. I did a lot of studies there just to have a presence in the mangrove. And in 2006, 2007, when we first saw it here, it was the big trees were girdled because this is the barangay captain. He said, I asked why, because he went to the local environment office. He said he wanted to make a living from these 100-hectare mangroves, what to do. And the advice was, you plant bakaw. When he went back, he saw they were all Avicennia. So what he did was he was going to cut down the Avicennia so he could plant bacao. And it was that time that we visited him, and I said, please do not. And he said, why not? I said, I will do research. It was not true, but anyway, I said anything to save the mangroves, and I did a proposal which was approved by CIFDEC, my research organization at that time. So this was all going back and forth. I was still at CIFDEC. And then when I retired, by the way, I retired 2007 at 2007. In 2007 and joined CSL. Then the Eco Park was inaugurated. This is the Lady Mayor, and this is from London Zoological Society. This is the PO. And then CSL came in, and you can see the publications. We had all these publications, no? Because before you do development, I strongly believe, NGOs are R&D. You first do the research before you develop. You just do not develop with no research, with no scientific background. So we have all the publications before we set out development plans for KI. Started off again with a nipa hut like this. And of course, the bamboo will not last long. Luckily, there was funding that came in from all sources, from TIESA, Tourism Authority, from Senator Legarda, 3 times she gave. No, Tourism Authority gave 3 times, 10 million, 7 million. Senator Legarda gave 10 million. DIPAR gave $500,000. So this has now really been improved, and it's a very nice place. If you should be in Aklan, you could try to go to Ibahay and visit KII. And here, these are the training courses. We have had training courses since 2009. Every time we bring our trainees to KII because of the diversity. It's really fantastic. That's the mayor, the present mayor, and the present mayor. Yeah, it's the lady mayor was replaced by her older son, and the older son became a governor or congressman. Then the younger son is now the present mayor. Anyway, these are our trainees. And here, still from our training course, and also, this goes, weddings have had photos there, but anyway, I think, no. Let me see what's happening here. Yes, weddings, and then a lot of students, even pupils, come there because we have access because of the 1 km. No, it's 2 km now long footwalk. And I had a project where I got some money from Pew to prepare mangrove modules for both elementary and high school. That was in 2008, 2009. Here, over 2 years, we produced this, and I offered this to DepEd. I think 6 DepEd secretaries. I had love letters to all of them, and nothing happened. So just individual copies for groups that are interested. But this really I spent $500,000 for the secondary module and another $500,000 for the elementary school. Because I would bring all of these people to the mangroves. You have to pay for the hotels, the transport, the food. But it was worth it for me. Except that the DepEd was not very receptive and didn't help out. So just the last 5 slides of eco parks, if you have mangroves in your sites. These are eco parks. The access is very important. The boardwalks here. Because, mangroves are intertidal. You have high tide, low tide, there will be water. So you need access. Very basic. And I have 6 grandchildren. These are 4 of them. By the way, this is the reason to the organizers why I took liberty to, to talk about all that history part, because I'm 77, soon to be 78. I said, when will I share all this information with my kababayans? I'm growing old, so I hope you don't mind. And lastly, since I think maybe 6 years ago, we've had Best Mangrove Awards. We go around looking at different mangrove areas all over the country, and these are the winners so far. This is Siargao, one in Masbate, This is Prieto Diaz, Sorsogon, Palumpon, Leyte, Calapan, Mindoro, Sagay, Negros, Balanga, Bataan, and Ibahay, Aklan. So if you have mangroves in your place, then please feel free to. Thank you.